I've lived on this land since I was 25 years old. The ranch belonged to my grandfather before me, and to his father before him. We've got a long line of boot prints pressed into this soil, and every stone fence post and sycamore tree tells a story. The lake, our lake, was always the heart of it all. On quiet mornings, you'd see the mist rising off the surface like breath. On hot afternoons, the grandkids would splash around, while I grilled catfish on the bank. That water ran in our blood. So when I woke up that Thursday and found a 12-foot metal gate bolted across my gravel road down to the lake, my first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. The sun had barely risen, and there it stood, gleaming silver bars chained together with a brand new padlock, as if someone had quietly tried to erase a century of ownership overnight. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my thermos, and walked down the path with the same routine I'd followed for 40 years. But this time, I stopped short. There was a fresh sign bolted above the lock. HOA Lake access permit holders only. Violators will be fined. I blinked, read it again. I don't live in some fancy suburb. This is open land, acres of rolling hills, cattle, wild deer, and the occasional ATV from the neighbor's kids. My property spans more than 90 acres, and the lake sits squarely in the southern half. No one had ever disputed that. Not the county, not the title office, not even the fish. So who the hell thought they had the right to fence it off? I tugged on the lock. Solid, stainless steel. The kind you'd need bolt cutters or an angle grinder to get through. There were tire tracks in the gravel, fresh ones, dual tires, probably a contractor's truck. Someone had been here last night. Quietly. Secretly. I walked back up to the house, the old familiar rage beginning to warm in my chest like a fire just starting to catch. That's when I saw her. Sharon. Every community has one. Ours just happened to give her a title. HOA president. She was standing at the edge of the road in front of her pristine black SUV clipboard, in hand sunglasses perched like a general, surveying the battlefield. She wore that smug little smile, the kind people reserve for when they think they've already won. "Good morning," she called, waving like we were neighbors who baked pies for each other. I kept walking, jaw tight. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I stopped. "What did you do to my lake access?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She tilted her head as if the question confused her. "Oh, the gate, yes, that was installed last night. HOA approved. We've had issues with unauthorized use lately. Liability risks." I stared at her deadpan. "That's my road, on my property." Sharon's smile didn't falter. Actually, per the revised HOA zoning map, the lake has been included as a shared amenity under extended jurisdiction. We had a legal review. It's about protecting value for everyone. I laughed once sharp dry. "You think a zoning map from your newsletter means you own my land?" She tapped her clipboard. "Annexation rights. They're quite standard. You should have read the community notices." I took a step closer enough for her to notice I wasn't playing along. "I never signed up for your HOA. My property predates this subdivision by 3 generations. Your fences, your bylaws, your little maps, they don't apply to me." Sharon didn't blink. "You may want to speak with your lawyer. In the meantime, access is restricted for safety." And with that, she turned, got into her SUV, and drove off slowly, deliberately, like she'd just handed me an eviction notice from my own damn past. I spent the rest of the morning at the county registrar's office. I brought everything: original deeds, topographical surveys, tax records, the 1956 hand-drawn map my grandfather used to settle the boundary dispute after the drought years. The same one that showed, without question, that the lake and the access road lay entirely within our parcel. The clerk raised her eyebrows when she saw the files. "Why are you bringing this in now?" she asked. "Because someone just locked me out of my own lake," I replied. She sighed. "Let me guess, HOA." I nodded. "You'd be shocked how often this happens," she muttered. I leaned forward. "Can they do that?" She shook her head. "They can try, but unless you signed a CC&R agreement voluntarily, they have no claim to annex anything without your consent. The problem is, they assume most people won't fight back." I smiled. "Well," I said, "I've never been most people." Back at home, I stood in front of the gate, again holding the files, thinking. Sharon and her little army had made a bold move, one designed not with legal backing, but with confidence that I wouldn't push back. A classic bluff. They didn't expect me to dig deep, to challenge, to hold the line. That's the thing about growing up in a ranching family. We don't move fences without reason. and we never ignore a locked gate. So I called an old friend of mine, Marcus, a property lawyer who once got a judge to overturn a county water claim because the original paperwork was filed in the wrong color ink. I explained the situation, told him about the sign, the lock, the zoning map fiction. He whistled low. "You want to go nuclear?" he asked. "I want to go smart," I replied. That night, I sat on the porch watching the stars rise over the lake I couldn't reach. And that's when it hit me. If the lock was the weapon, then maybe I needed to own the armory. The next morning, before the roosters had even finished their first crow, I was already halfway to Fairview, the nearest town with more than one traffic light. And more importantly, a locksmith supply wholesaler. I didn't go there looking for bolt cutters. That would have been too easy, too temporary. No, I had a better idea. I wanted to know who had installed that lock, where it came from, and how deep Sharon's little HOA empire had embedded itself in local vendors. I parked my truck outside of Fairview Lock and Key, a squat brick building with barred windows and a rusted bell over the door that let out a loud clang when I walked in. Behind the counter was Raymond, a gray-bearded man in flannel with half-moon glasses and a coffee mug that said, "I void warranties." He looked up, squinted, and smiled. "Elliot Hayes. Haven't seen you since you locked yourself out of your barn, trying to save that baby goat." I chuckled, still not my proudest moment. "What brings you in today?" I slid a photo across the counter, one I'd taken of the lake gate lock. Raymond adjusted his glasses and frowned. "Yep, that's one of ours. That's the X20R series. New model, heavy duty. Only sold it to 2 clients last month." I leaned forward. "Can you tell me who?" Raymond scratched his beard. "Technically, no. But let's say if a hypothetical HOA president wearing enough perfume to knock out a skunk ordered a dozen of these last Tuesday, I might remember." I smiled. "Did this hypothetical person request custom key codes?" "She did," he said, "but she made a mistake." I raised an eyebrow. Raymond pulled out a folder. "She used the HOA's public vendor account. Means I keep a full log, and..." He pulled a small envelope from a drawer. "Ordered one too many keys. Left this one behind." I held it up, admiring the little brass shape that had so arrogantly tried to redraw my family's legacy. Raymond saw the spark in my eye and leaned in. "Whatever you're planning, just don't get arrested. I don't do jailhouse key deliveries." By afternoon, I'd made 2 more calls, one to Marcus, my lawyer friend, and the other to Maria, my longtime neighbor, who also happened to run the town's most read Facebook page, Haven't You Heard? Within hours, the post went up. "Lakegate. Did our HOA just lock out a century-old rancher?" The comments exploded. Sharon tried to respond with legalese and veiled threats, but the tide was already shifting. Pictures of the sign and the lock were reposted over and over. Then came the drone footage. Someone flew one right over the fence and captured a shot of my lake at sunset, fenced off like it had been stolen. By dinner time, local reporters were calling. I declined interviews because I had other plans. The next morning, I drove to the small industrial park, where the regional headquarters of Haven Key Security Solutions was based, the parent company of the lock manufacturer Raymond had mentioned. I didn't go in as a rancher. I went in as a buyer. Inside, I met with a representative named Carla Sharp, suit sharper eyes. "I'm looking to invest in rural security services," I said, thinking long-term. "Gate systems, commercial access control, that sort of thing." She nodded, flipping open a glossy brochure. "We're expanding rapidly, especially with HOA partnerships." "Any of them around Oak Haven?" I asked casually. She paused. "Yes. In fact, they've been one of our most frequent purchasers." I leaned back. "I'd like to buy a stake." She blinked. "Excuse me. I'd like to invest, quietly. Maybe even pick up your local distribution. I've got property, warehouses, capital, and a personal interest in locks." Carla hesitated. "I'll have to talk to the board," she said. "Do that," I said, standing. "Tell them I'm not just a client. I'm the reason Oak Haven exists." 2 weeks later, the paperwork was done. With Marcus's legal maneuvering, I acquired the licensing rights for Haven Key's regional franchise, the entire 3-county area, including Oak Haven. I now controlled every authorized lock, every master key list, every access protocol sold under their brand. And as the new regional partner, I had one immediate request: recce everything, not just the gate. The entire HOA system, clubhouse, tennis courts, meeting halls. Every lock tied to the recent bulk order. Because guess what? They'd registered it all under a shared master key system. One master. One owner now. Me. I drove back to the ranch that same afternoon. Sharon was standing near the gate, clipboard in hand. berating some poor maintenance worker who was sweating bullets under her scrutiny. She spotted me and marched over. "You're trespassing," she snapped. I held up a new brass key and smiled. "Actually, I own the lock." She blinked. "What?" "I bought the lock company. Change the master key. This one's the only working copy." You can't do that." I leaned in. "You fenced off my lake. You thought paper bylaws could override deeds. You wanted control." I tossed the key in the air and caught it. "Now I have it." She looked like she might explode. "I'm calling the police." "Good," I said, walking past her. "Tell them to bring bolt cutters. You'll need them." The next morning, the gate was still there, tall, defiant, absurd. But now it served a different purpose. It no longer symbolized HOA control. It was a monument to their arrogance, now under my control. I stood beside it, sipping coffee from my travel mug, watching as a line of HOA residents slowed their cars at the sight of the locked entrance. Sharon must have called an emergency board meeting, because within an hour, SUVs began to roll in clean beige and identical, like bureaucratic soldiers answering the call of panic. First came Henry Larson, HOA treasurer and proud owner of a sweater collection so bland it could neutralize coffee. Then came Patricia Evans, secretary and self-proclaimed compliance queen. And finally, Sharon, her sunglasses darker, her walk faster, her mouth tighter than ever. She approached with fire in her eyes. "You've hijacked HOA property," she said, voice high and clipped. I gestured to the land under our feet. "Funny. I thought this was my road, on my land." "This is outrageous," she barked. "We had contracts, security, infrastructure. You're interfering with HOA operations." I held up the key. "This lock legally installed by your contractor, under your vendor ID. Only now, your vendor is mine." Henry stepped forward. "Let's be reasonable, Mr. Hayes. Surely there's a way to work this out." I cut him off. "There is. Remove the gate. Publicly retract the annexation claim. Issue a formal apology for trespassing and lock tampering, and refund every cent of the HOA budget spent on that metal monstrosity." Sharon scoffed. "You're dreaming." "Then start walking," I said. "You'll need another way to your clubhouse, because this gate, this key. Until I see a court order, they stay with me." Patricia whispered something to Sharon, who turned on her heel and stomped back toward her car. But I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I updated the county with a full incident report. I wasn't filing charges, not yet, but I wanted everything documented: photos, titles, legal documents, even the sales receipt showing Haven Key now operated under EH Holdings, my LLC. I also submitted a civil notice of land interference, requesting that all HOA board activities cease on my property. That meant no patrols, no meetings, no flyers posted on fences, no HOA enforcement traffic down my road. The best part, I sent the notice via certified mail, with a copy addressed personally to Sharon, and another to the county newspaper editor. By the weekend, things had gone viral. Someone, probably Maria again, posted a TikTok showing Sharon screaming at the locked gate while I calmly trimmed the grass on my side. Caption: "When HOA Sharon fences off your ranch, so you buy the lock company and change the keys." Over 300,000 views by midnight. The comments were glorious. "This man is my hero. Grandpa played 4D chess. HOA got Uno reversed so hard I heard it from space." Even the local TV station ran a segment titled "Landowner Outsmarts HOA with Bold Legal Move." And suddenly, I wasn't just the guy who owned the lake. I was the man who'd locked the gate on tyranny with a smile and a key. But Sharon wasn't done. Late Sunday evening, a white sedan rolled up to my mailbox. A teenager in a red hoodie, clearly some intern slipped out, dropped a manila envelope into the box, and sped off like it might explode. Inside the envelope, a cease and desist letter on HOA letterhead, claiming I was interfering with HOA access to shared amenities and disrupting continuity of community services. It was signed by Sharon and laughably CC'd to an HOA enforcement council. I read it twice, then poured a whiskey, leaned back on the porch, and drafted my reply. "Dear HOA Board, this road and the gate upon it lie fully within parcel number 714L, registered under my name since 1996. Your lock was installed without permission. Your signs constitute unauthorized declaration of authority. Your letter is noted and irrelevant. As for access to the lake, consider this your final notice. This land is private. This gate is real. And this lock only opens for those who respect it. Sincerely, Elliot Hayes. P.S. Tell Sharon I bought the lock company. I could buy the fencing company too." I slid my letter into an envelope, addressed it to the HOA office. and walked it to the end of my road. Sharon's precious gate stood gleaming in the moonlight, untouched, unbowed. I slipped the letter into the box, clicked the padlock, and turned to walk back. Behind me, the night was quiet, orderly, secure, just like Sharon wanted. Only this time, it belonged to me. By Monday morning, the HOA newsletter had already tried to spin the story. A bland PDF emailed to every resident subject line. Community access update read like the minutes of a royal court in disarray. It claimed that due to unforeseen logistical issues, temporary gate access was under review, and residents were encouraged to be patient as the board resolves an isolated contractor matter. Isolated contractor matter, my foot. What they didn't expect was that people in Oak Creek weren't as docile as they used to be. You block people's road for a week, and they grumble. You mess with their Lakeview's weekend fishing spots or their shortcut to the farmer's market, you've got an uprising. By noon, I'd had 6 cars pull up to my fence, not angrily, but curiously. Folks from down the ridge, from Maple Drive, and those new houses they built near the wetlands. First came the Thompsons. George and Ellen, retired school teachers, they pulled up in their dusty Subaru and waved me over. Elliot, Ellen said, leaning out her window. Is it true you own this road? Yep, I said, always have. And the lake? South Shore all the way to the ridge line. She glanced toward the gate, and they locked it. Then you changed the locks. I nodded. She laughed. You're a legend. I brought banana bread. By evening, the traffic didn't stop. Neighbors came not to argue, but to ask questions, real ones. The kind we should have been asking long ago. What gives the HOA the right to block your road? They say they annexed it. But no paperwork, no vote. Just one day, bam, a fence. That can't be legal, right? It's not. The more people heard, the more frustrated they got. Not with me, with the HOA. Turns out I wasn't the only one they'd pushed. Clara at Lot 18 had been fined $250 for using non-HOA approved mulch. Arjun on Clover Street was cited for excessive seasonal lighting in July. And poor Diego, the landscaper's son, had been threatened with contractor expulsion just for fixing sprinklers past 6 p.m. It wasn't a community anymore. It was a kingdom. And Sharon was its queen. Not for long. On Wednesday, I got a call from Caleb, a neighbor I barely knew, tall, always wore faded cargo shorts, and had a golden retriever that barked at clouds. You home? He asked. Always. Got something you should see. Minutes later, his truck pulled in. He climbed down with a cardboard sign in hand. It read, $20 per vehicle scenic route. Access proceeds go toward HOA Freedom Fund. I blinked. You're kidding. He grinned. People want to pay you, Elliot. Not just for the road, for the principle. You stood up when the rest of us were too tired or too scared. By that weekend, there was a line. Families drove up just to see the famous gate. Some took selfies. One kid asked me to autograph his bike helmet. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. I set up a little fold-out table, stuck an umbrella into the ground, and made a chalkboard sign. Private road, access fee $20 per vehicle. All funds support legal reform for landowner rights. People happily paid. Some gave more. And every night, I wrote receipts, kept a ledger, and set aside every dollar in a separate fund just in case I needed to take this all the way to court. Sharon tried to respond with force. She sent another cease and desist, this one with a longer letterhead and a new law firm logo that looked suspiciously like something she found on Canva. But something had changed. People started pushing back. George and Ellen wrote a letter to the HOA demanding transparency. Caleb organized a town hall on neutral ground, the local library. And Clara, she filed a complaint with the state's community housing department. Not just about the gate, about everything. The fines, the surveillance, the secret votes, the spending. We were no longer individuals against a board. We were a community against a regime. And all it took was one lock. Late one night, I was sitting on my porch when a car pulled up quietly. Not a neighbor, too new, too polished. A black luxury sedan. It parked just outside the gate. The driver stepped out. A woman in a navy suit and low heels. Not Sharon. She walked up to the gate, hands visible. Calm. Mr. Hayes. I stood. That's me. My name is Nora Bennett. I represent several concerned homeowners regarding the HOA's recent conduct. I crossed my arms. You with the HOA? She shook her head. I'm with the state attorney's homeowner division. We've had an influx of complaints from Oak Creek and quite a few social media tags. I raised an eyebrow. I'd like to formally request a meeting, she said. Off the record, for now. And just like that, I realized something. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was becoming a movement. The library meeting room was packed. It was the first open forum Oak Creek had seen in years. Folding chairs filled with neighbors who had once kept their heads down, now sitting shoulder to shoulder. The usual hushed murmurs of compliance had given way to a buzz of questions, whispered frustrations, and, more importantly, plans. Sharon didn't show up at first. For the first 20 minutes, Caleb opened the floor. This is about reclaiming community. Real transparency. No more mystery finds. No more anonymous letters taped to trash bins. Diego stood up and described how his family had been cited for unauthorized lawn care. Clara read aloud her violation notice for placing a bird feeder too close to a sidewalk. Even Patricia, once Sharon's loyal compliance whisperer, showed up in a plain blouse, sitting quietly in the back. She didn't speak, but she didn't leave either. Then the door swung open. Sharon stormed in like a queen who'd been kept waiting, clipboard in hand, pearl earrings gleaming. Her expression was somewhere between outrage and disbelief. "What is this?" she demanded. "This isn't an official HOA meeting. This is an unauthorized gathering that violates community protocol." Caleb leaned into the mic. "It's not an HOA meeting. It's a homeowner meeting." Laughter erupted, a slow-building one that Sharon didn't know how to stop. She turned red. "You think this is funny? You're jeopardizing property values. You're letting some cowboy with a key control our infrastructure." She pointed to me, seated 3 rows back, arms crossed, watching her unravel. I didn't flinch. Neither did the room. Sharon's voice wobbled. "You think I wanted to install that gate? You think I enjoy dealing with your complaints? I have done everything to protect this community. Without me, this place would be a dump." A woman near the front, elderly, polite-looking, stood. "Sharon, my grandson built our deck ramp so I could go outside again. You fined us $500 and threatened a lien." Silence. Sharon opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked around, not at allies, but at strangers. Eyes that had once feared her now just looked tired. And someone was filming. Not in secret. Just holding up a phone. No hiding. Just truth. Sharon noticed. "You can't record me without consent." "It's a public meeting," Caleb said. "We've all consented. You walked into it." The video went online that night, labeled HOA President Meltdown Caught Live at Community Town Hall. It spread faster than wildfire in dry brush. And the internet, the glorious, unrelenting internet, did what it always does. It remembered. The next morning, the county paper ran a headline: HOA President Faces Backlash Amid Gate Controversy. They quoted multiple residents. They quoted me. But most damaging of all, they quoted Sharon herself. Her exact words: "I have done everything to protect this community. Without me, this place would be a dump." The HOA board held a closed-door meeting that night. But Patricia called me afterward. "She's out," she said. "Voted 5-1 for immediate suspension pending audit." I was the abstain. "Audit?" I asked. "There's more, Elliot. The party budget, the security contracts, those mystery maintenance fees. We never approved most of it." My heart ticked. "How much are we talking?" "Early estimate, over 80,000 misallocated across 3 years." I whistled low. She's going to need more than a clipboard to explain that. 3 days later, I got a letter. Not from Sharon. Not from the HOA. From the Office of the State Attorney General. They were opening an official inquiry into Oak Creek HOA practices, including fraudulent annexation attempts, financial mismanagement, and property interference. The letter was signed by Nora Bennett, and at the bottom, in her own handwriting, she'd scribbled, "Thank you for locking that gate." Back at the ranch, things were quiet again. The line of cars had slowed. People still waved. Some stopped just to chat, to drop off pie or offer a handshake. Caleb built a little donation box near the toll booth with a carved sign, "Support Honest Community." Sharon's fence, still up, but now it sagged, literally and metaphorically. Half of it had been removed by the HOA themselves after being cited for building code violations. The rest slowly vanishing one section at a time like the last embers of a bonfire that had burned far too long. And me, I was standing tall, not with anger, not with revenge, but with resolution. Because sometimes the best way to fix a broken gate is to own the key, hold the line, and let the truth unlock everything. It was the clinking sound that woke me up. Not the rooster, not the wind chimes. It was the unmistakable rattle of metal on metal, someone locking something. I pulled on my boots and walked out with my coffee still in hand. The sun had barely crested over the ridge, but I could see the shape of a pickup parked near the old barn gate. Two men in reflective vests, neither of them from the county, were finishing up a job they clearly didn't want to be seen doing. Padlocks. Bright silver ones new, glinting in the early morning light, and nailed to the post beside them a laminated sign read, "Private HOA property. No access without approval." I didn't yell, didn't wave, just stared until they drove off. They didn't even look back. That afternoon, a courier dropped off an envelope at my front porch. Inside was a notice of restricted access, issued on HOA letterhead, signed by Sharon, naturally claiming that the easement boundaries had shifted and that perimeter protection had been installed for the benefit of community integrity. In simpler terms, Sharon had locked me out of my own damn road. It wasn't just the road by the barn either. Later that evening, when I drove down to check the lake culvert, I found the access gate there chained shut too. Another shiny padlock, another smug little HOA sign. They'd locked down every entrance to my property that passed within 20 feet of their imaginary jurisdiction. Fences, chains, warnings, all without any legal order warrant or process. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was trespassing. It was war. The next morning, I called a friend of mine from back in my Army logistics days, Samuel Reed, who now ran one of the biggest lock and security companies in the county. I asked him a simple question. How hard would it be to buy every master key pattern used by the HOA's locks? He laughed. You serious, Thomas? Dead serious. He paused. Then not hard at all. Turned out, HOA Sharon hadn't gone through any high-security vendors. No municipal-grade gear. She'd ordered her locks in bulk from a chain hardware store, all keyed alike, all generic, and all registered to a master file sitting in Samuel's system. Within the hour, I bought out their whole lock order history. But I didn't stop there. I bought the entire regional license for that lock model series. Then I called the HOA security contractor, the one Sharon had contracted for their padlock installations. I introduced myself, explained what had happened, and asked very kindly for their cooperation. They didn't hesitate. Apparently, Sharon had stiffed them on their last invoice. I had their attention. Within 24 hours, they delivered every access schematic key log and installation location directly to me. It was all I needed. But I wasn't about to go around with bolt cutters. That would make me the villain in her narrative. No, I had a better idea. I had Samuel and his crew change out every lock on my land. Same brand, same shape, but with an entirely new key pattern, one that only I controlled. Then I posted my own signs, printed nice and bold. Private access road owner, controlled locks. Trespassers will be charged a $200 entry fee and reported to sheriff. And just for good measure, I installed motion-triggered trail cameras and solar-powered lights at each gate. Not to spy, just to document. It was legal, it was mine, and it drove Sharon absolutely insane. It didn't take long for the complaints to start rolling in. Residents were furious. One man, I think his name was Victor, lived near the lake, came banging on my front door. Red in the face. What's this about the HOA not having gate access anymore, he yelled. I got turned around by one of your signs. I invited him in for lemonade. Victor, I said. Did you know that access road you just tried to drive through isn't actually HOA property? It's mine. It always has been. I pay the taxes on it. I maintain the gravel. I installed the drainage. He blinked. Well, Sharon said. I raised a hand. Exactly, Sharon said. I opened a folder on my kitchen table. Inside were copies of my property deed, the county easement map, and the licensing papers from the lock company. I let him read in silence. By the end, he looked like he'd swallowed a sock. I didn't know, he muttered. I'm sorry. No harm done, I said, handing him a fresh glass. But maybe it's time to ask who really locked who out. Within a week, the entire community knew. Sharon tried to send one of her compliance officers to cut my new locks. But the man turned around the moment he saw the trail cams and the sheriff's sticker I'd laminated to the post. I had already spoken to the county and filed an affidavit of property encroachment. The HOA had no legal standing to alter anything on my land. They'd crossed the line. And now, they had no keys to the kingdom. It started with a note in my mailbox. Folded neatly, no envelope, no signature. Just a single sentence, handwritten in careful cursive. We were wrong. You were right. And we're with you now. I didn't know who left it, but it was the first crack in the wall that Sharon had built, not the metal ones she padlocked shut, but the invisible ones, the social ones. The kind of fences made from fear and whispered HOA threats. But just like those padlocks, they were all starting to come loose. The very next morning, a line of SUVs showed up on the side of my ranch road. At first, I braced for another round of angry doorbell rants, maybe even some confrontation. But instead, people stepped out with folding chairs, sandwiches, lawn umbrellas. They weren't here to fight. They were here to support. Victor was among the first, the same neighbor who'd once banged on my door. Now he waved me over with a sheepish grin. "We're staging a little protest," he said, unfolding a cardboard sign that read, "Toll paid with a smile, $20 to freedom." I stared. He shrugged. "If she can fine us for mailbox paint color, we can pay you for being right." A woman I recognized as Mrs. Whitmore from 3 houses up offered me a mason jar of iced tea. "This is the best community event we've had all year," she said, gesturing toward the gravel shoulder, now filled with neighbors chatting and laughing. They'd parked along the fence line like it was a tailgate. Someone brought a Bluetooth speaker. Another neighbor set up a foldable table and started handing out homemade cookies labeled Freedom Snacks. I couldn't believe it. And they all insisted on paying the $20 private road toll, every single one. I told them it wasn't necessary. They insisted. "We're not paying for the road," said one man. "We're paying for the message." Sharon must have heard. I imagined her watching from her oversized bay window, clutching her precious HOA rulebook like a lifeline. She'd told them for years that order came from control, that rules were safety, that silence was unity. But this people laughing, talking, coming together in protest of her regime, this was community. And it was beautiful. Later that afternoon, someone brought local news. A young anchor from Channel 9 pulled up in a minivan with a tripod and a wide-eyed cameraman. She wore heels entirely unsuited for a gravel ranch road, but walked straight up to me and said, "Are you the homeowner who replaced the HOA's locks?" I nodded. "Guilty as charged." She laughed. "Mind if we do a segment?" I glanced around at the crowd, now nearly 30 people, with more arriving by the hour. "You'd better hurry," I said. "We're running out of parking." She interviewed me right there, under the big oak by the toll sign. I kept my words simple, respectful. I didn't bash Sharon or the HOA, I just told the truth. That I'd owned the land before the subdivision even broke ground. That the HOA had installed locks on roads they didn't own. That I'd legally reclaimed access and posted lawful toll signs only after repeated harassment. That evening, the story aired across the county. The title on screen read, "When HOA oversteps, this grandpa steps up." The image was of me holding a coffee mug, standing beside the sign that read $20 per vehicle. I thought it'd cause a stir. I underestimated. The next day, cars lined up all the way to the main road. But not just local strangers, people from neighboring towns, farmers, vets, young couples, even a group of motorcyclists who said they'd seen the story on Facebook and wanted to ride for ranch rights. It wasn't just viral, it was vindication. I didn't keep the money. Every dollar collected went into a clear donation jar labeled Community Fund for Roads Not Roses. A jab, of course, at the HOA's infamous landscaping expenses. Another of Sharon's pet projects that had drained funds while roads crumbled. More than one resident came to apologize. "We didn't know," they said. "We were afraid," they said. "I didn't want to lose my mailbox," one man confessed. I nodded. I understood. Sharon had built a system that punished doubt and rewarded silence. But now, the silence was breaking. That evening, a pickup pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Walter, one of the original HOA board members, a good man once before Sharon turned him into a yes man. He didn't speak right away, just held out an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "A petition to vote out the current board." I opened it. Over 75% of signatures. "She doesn't know yet," he said, "but she will." I stared at the paper, then back toward the ranch road, where a few folks were still gathered around the toll sign, sipping sweet tea and watching the sunset. "We're tired," Walter added. "Tired of being ruled by someone who thinks power comes from paranoia. You reminded us that it doesn't." I smiled. "I just changed the locks, Walter. Y'all did the rest." He laughed. It was the first honest laugh I'd heard from that man in years. By sunrise the next morning, it wasn't just neighbors and reporters knocking on my ranch gate. It was a county official. Clipboard in hand, vest marked zoning and land management. He wasn't here to shut me down. He was here to ask questions about the road. "I'm told," he said, "you own this entire stretch from County Route 12 to the subdivision gate. Confirmed by the plat maps." I nodded. "That's right. Been in the family since 1960. He smiled. Professional, but just a little amused. Well, sir, I'm here because the HOA filed a complaint. Said you were obstructing community access and charging unauthorized tolls. He flipped to another page. But I have a counter-complaint from a dozen residents claiming the HOA illegally installed padlocks and fencing on private property. I handed him a file folder, copies of deeds, property line surveys, letters from my attorney, even the receipt from when I bought the local lock company purely to prove a point, but legally airtight. He leafed through it all and exhaled. I'll file this, he said. From where I'm standing, your toll booth is fully within your rights. Frankly, I wish more landowners were this well organized. As he left, Sharon's silver Range Rover came barreling down the road, stopping just short of the toll booth. She stepped out in an immaculate navy pantsuit, a poor choice for ranch gravel, and stormed toward me. This is harassment, she spat. You're manipulating people, turning them against the HOA. I said nothing, just pointed to the handmade wooden sign that now stood beside the toll post. It read, "This land is older than your subdivision. Respect it or pay up." The neighbors, who had already started gathering again for their morning coffee at the gate, let out a few chuckles. Someone even slow-clapped. Sharon turned red. I have rights, she snapped. So do I said calmly. And I've got the land title to back it up. That was when the dam broke. A voice rang out from behind Sharon Victor again. No one ever voted on those fences, Sharon. Then, Mrs. Whitmore, you told us he was trespassing on HOA land. And then a chorus. What about the $10,000 spent on that summer gala? Why were we charged twice for landscaping? Where's the financial report from last year? Sharon tried to speak over them, but the crowd was rolling now. Voices rising. Questions, flooding in, all of them pointed straight at her. She turned back to me. I'll sue. I took out my phone, tapped the voice memo icon, and held it up. Please say that again. Nice and clear for the record. She stormed off. Later that week, the county office posted a notice pending investigation into HOA governance procedures and potential misuse of funds. A local lawyer, not mine, filed a motion to freeze the HOA's discretionary accounts until an independent audit could be performed. And an email leaked. Oh, it was a beauty. From Sharon's HOA email dated 3 months ago. We can't keep the books fully open. It'll just confuse the residents. They're not accountants. The screenshot made it to a neighborhood Facebook group. Within hours, it was reposted with the caption, Sharon thinks we're too dumb to read spreadsheets. Time to read her the law. Channel 9 came back for a follow-up story. This time, they didn't even ask for an interview. They just filmed the community meeting where over 50 residents signed a motion of no confidence against the HOA board. Standing at the front of the gymnasium, the same one where Sharon once held court, was Walter. I move, he said, reading from the paper, to initiate a community-wide audit of HOA expenditures, to freeze all enforcement actions during the investigation, and to suspend the current board pending the results. The vote unanimous. Sharon, absent from the meeting, released a statement calling it all slanderous, baseless, and illegal. No one cared, and through all of it, the toll booth stood. Every car that passed by, whether they dropped a 20 in the jar or not, saw the same message, a quiet little symbol that said, no more. We know better now. Even the sheriff stopped by one evening, off duty. He leaned against this post, sipping a soda, and said, never thought I'd see the day when a toll booth would clean up a neighborhood. Sometimes I said you don't need a gavel, just a little wood, and a sign with the truth on it. The pressure finally cracked her. By the end of that week, Sharon could no longer walk her dog without whispers trailing her like dust. Her once authoritative strut had turned stiff, robotic, the click of her heels on the sidewalk no longer announcing leadership, but echoing isolation. The mailbox out front of her immaculate 2-story colonial filled with anonymous letters. Some were polite calls for her resignation. Others were less so. And taped to her door one morning was a printout of her infamous email, "They're not accountants." She tried to deflect, to reassert control with official-looking flyers stuffed into each resident's mailbox. Emergency HOA briefing. Sunday 6 p.m. Mandatory. That Sunday, the town hall was packed. She walked in wearing a bold red blazer, hair curled like she was still in control. She approached the microphone like she was ready to put the fire out. But what followed wasn't a briefing. It was a breakdown. Let's be honest, she began, clutching a stack of papers. This chaos has been fueled by one man's personal vendetta. A man who doesn't believe in community, Who charged you to use your own road? Who made us the laughingstock of the county? Someone from the back yelled, "You mean the man who owns the road?" Laughter burst out. Sharon flushed, but pressed on. "I have served as your HOA president with dedication and vision. I've worked to increase your property values. I've tried to maintain standards." More murmurs, shaking heads. Victor raised his hand. "Sharon, where's the $9,000 listed as security services? And why are there 2 checks made out to your brother-in-law's business?" Sharon ignored him. "I'm being targeted," she said, her voice rising. "And I won't stand for it." She slammed her hand on the podium. "I will not be bullied off this board." Silence. Then came the quiet, firm voice of Mrs. Whitmore. "You're not being bullied, Sharon. You're being held accountable." The room broke into applause. Not raucous or cruel, just honest, resonant, tired applause. Sharon stood frozen, then dropped the microphone and stormed out. The next day, a special motion passed. The HOA board would be subjected to a full independent audit conducted by a licensed municipal accounting firm. All financial activity from the past 5 years would be reviewed. Access to discretionary spending was frozen immediately. Sharon submitted her resignation that afternoon. No signature, just a scribbled "I quit" on a Post-it note left on the HOA office door. The audit findings arrived 3 weeks later, and they were a masterpiece of mismanagement. Over $53,000 had been spent on events, gift baskets, and so-called community engagement dinners, none of which had proper approval or itemized receipts. The annexation claims that attempted to rope in properties like mine, entirely fabricated. The county had never received or approved any such zoning requests, and most damning, nearly $17,000 in reimbursements for security equipment that didn't exist, cameras that were never installed, uniforms never issued, and training sessions held at Sharon's cousin's vacation cabin. The report ended with a note from the auditor. This board operated without oversight, transparency, or adherence to legal standards. We recommend immediate restructuring and third-party oversight for all future operations. The media got hold of it, of course. Channel 9 aired a piece called HOA Gone Rogue, featuring sound bites from the town hall meltdown and snapshots of the audit report. My toll booth even made the footage. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came one bright morning, when a modest silver sedan pulled into my driveway. A woman stepped out, glasses, clipboard, and a friendly smile. "Mr. Bennett," she asked. "I'm from the State Attorney General's office. We've reviewed the audit. There's grounds here not just for civil penalties, but potential criminal fraud charges." She paused. "And we'd like to invite you to speak at the state-level HOA reform panel being assembled this fall." I blinked. "You want me to talk?" "You've become something of a symbol," she said. "Grassroots accountability. Property rights. Peaceful resistance. You didn't fight fire with fire. You just put up a fair price and told the truth." I looked at the ranch, the gate, the toll booth that had become something of a landmark now. Kids took selfies with it. One couple even used it as the backdrop for engagement photos. Maybe it was silly, but it mattered. I smiled. "I'll think about it." She nodded. "Take your time." As she drove off, I noticed something taped to the toll booth post. It was a hand-drawn picture from one of the neighbor kids, crayon colors bright and bold. It showed a cowboy hat, a gravel road, and a big wooden sign. Across the top, in wobbly letters, it read, "Our Grandpa Hero." By autumn, everything had changed, not just on paper, but in the soul of the neighborhood. The gate was gone. The metal monstrosity Sharon had erected across my ranch's driveway had been dismantled by a vote and a volunteer work crew made up of neighbors, the same neighbors who once ignored me, who once sped past with their windows rolled up when all this began. Now they shook my hand. They waved. They brought pies. The toll booth still standing. Still collecting $20 per car, though now it had a fresh coat of paint and a plaque, courtesy of the new HOA board, that read, "In honor of standing tall and charging fairly, Mr. Thomas Bennett, defender of the ranch." I didn't need the plaque, but I appreciated it. Truth be told, I didn't even need the $20 anymore. Between the interviews, the state reform panel, and the media attention, I'd started getting invitations to speak at events, even a book deal from a small press. But I kept the toll. Not for the money, for the principle. The principle that if you want to pass through someone's land, you respect it. You don't fence it. You don't fine it. You honor it. That became something of a motto around here. The new HOA charter, completely rewritten and voted on with full transparency, included what they called the Bennett Clause. It ensured that no resident could ever be annexed or fined without consent notice and third-party review. It also banned private security operations and required any zoning changes to be filed directly with the county. Most satisfying of all, Sharon moved out, quietly. No farewell party, no flyers, no last words, just a for sale sign one morning and a moving truck by noon. She didn't even say goodbye, but the neighborhood did. One Saturday afternoon, the new board threw a community BBQ. They asked me to be the guest of honor, but I told them I'd rather just show up with my ribs and sit like everyone else, and I did. I wore my old hat, I brought my folding chair, and for the first time in years, I sat under the cottonwood tree near the edge of the lake, the same lake she once tried to block me from, and I watched as kids skipped rocks, folks played cornhole, and someone's golden retriever jumped into the water with zero regard for quiet hours or shoreline regulations. There were no drones in the sky, no HOA patrol cars circling the lot, just the sound of laughter, barbecue smoke, and the buzz of late summer joy. I leaned back, chewing on a piece of brisket, and thought about how it all started. Just a fence, just a clipboard, just one person thinking they could turn their control issues into policy, but also just one man with a backbone, a deed, and a handmade toll booth. Sometimes that's all it takes. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the sky turned amber and gold, I took a quiet walk down the gravel road back to the booth. I flipped the closed sign for the night, locked the little drawer that held the bills and change, and stood for a moment with my hand resting on the roof of the structure. I didn't hear footsteps, but I heard a voice. Mr. Bennett. I turned. A young man, maybe early 20s, stood there holding a notebook. I'm writing a paper for my civic studies class. My professor said you kind of changed the way people talk about HOAs. I chuckled. Is that right? He nodded. Would you mind answering a few questions? I looked out over the land, my land, the gravel, the pasture, the lake that shimmered in the moonlight. I've got time, I said. He flipped open the notebook, pen poised. What made you fight back? I didn't even have to think, because it was never about the money, or the gate, or even the rules. It was about respect. And when people forget that land has memory, when they fence off what they don't own and silence what they don't understand, someone has to remind them. He scribbled furiously. And how do you think you change things? I smiled. I didn't change anything. I just put up a sign. The boy blinked. A sign. Yeah, I said, turning toward my house. One that said, you don't get to walk over me, not for free. He stood still, nodding slowly, the meaning landing deeper than the words. I walked off into the twilight, the dust kicking gently under my boots. Behind me, the booth stood proud in the dusk, not just a toll booth anymore, but a monument to quiet rebellion, to fair resistance, and to one stubborn old man who believed fences should never replace respect. And that was the end of that story, but not the end of the lesson.